Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Barsky, and I'm the editor at the Business Record. I'm joined with a couple special guests in public education to talk about diversity and inclusion. And we'll be talking about what today's young people are facing as it relates to equity and what that means for business leaders as they try to make their organizations inclusive. So today we have with us Chiquita Loveless. Chiquita serves in dual roles as interim director for diversity, inclusion, and social justice and director for military and veterans student services at the University of Northern Iowa. She served in the U.S. Navy for more than 23 years, retiring as communication officer, chief warrant officer too. So welcome, Chiquita.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Hello, everyone.
And we've got Margo Foreman on as well. And Margo just left her post at Iowa State last week and is now the Vice President and Chief Officer for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Clark University. Beyond working on DEI strategy, she is also a content expert relative to higher education, equal opportunity compliance, affirmative action, discrimination and harassment, and Title IX programs. So welcome, Margo.
Thank you.
All right. So question to kind of kick it off for both of you, and Chiquita, we'll have you go first. But in your realm of working with students and seeing some of their needs as it relates to DEI, what should employers be preparing for, knowing some of the things that you're seeing in higher education?
Okay, so I jotted some things down. Margo, you may be a little bit more savvy with regards to this, but I didn't want to forget anything. So with regards to DEI, students will continue to need cultural humility and empathy as they navigate through the oppression, suppression, and depressions they have often encountered. Most come with baggage because they are first-generation students, and the pressures that they bring with them as I have to do better, I need to do more, I need to do that. And they're also navigating, trying to attain a college degree. The one that need to understand and feel, they want to feel like they belong, and they want to succeed and not be judged for their differences. And we encounter that a lot at UNI. We've gotten a lot better, but microaggressions and comments tend to hinder some of the students and get them off track. And so, myself and my staff, we're here to tell them, hey, you got to get back in the fight and do what you need to do. To address the needs, employers should expect to provide a culture of equity, specifically as it relates to handling workplace conflicts. Also, understanding perspectives and valuing those perspectives are important.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And Margo, what would you say?
I think that what we're seeing is this phenomena of our college campuses turning into unqualified healthcare and mental health facilities. So the university in and of itself, first we need to realize that higher education from its very premise was for the elite. Like the system is built to educate the elite. And it is a system that protects itself. So anytime there's challenges to that, the system tries to close around it. And we need in institutions the ability for doors to be open and walls to be broken down so that we can allow ourselves to see a 21st century educational institute and organization. So that means we're also going to have to see that this is a quest that has to be relative to those students who are coming in, and students of all identities are coming into the institution with pre-diagnosis of healthcare and mental health issues. I think that we have to look at administration and those providers, and they're overwhelmed by that. But one of the things that I don't think they've taken into consideration is that students who've been coming into the institute in white dominated institutes. So I don't call them PWIs. A PWI says it's, predominantly white, but a white dominated institution tells us who has power, right? So it's not about the numbers as much as who owns power and access and benefit and privilege. And so our students who have been marginalized, have marginalized identity, whether that is from disability, it could be veteran status, it could be, all the whole realm, BIPOC, LGBTQIA, those intersectionalities, they have been living with this trauma from first time they set themselves into a preschool or a elementary school all the way up through high school. So they've been dragging this trauma packed life along with them. And they have some resiliency, this is true. But their triggers are going to be very thin and very fine. And so what I see is they get into the institution, they've been making their way, they've had the help of their parents and guardians and loved ones to kind of navigate that. Maybe a mentor or a coach or an art teacher or someone who's kind of knows who they are, and then they find themselves a small fish in a big pond where all sorts of things are happening and there are no visible or enough equitable people for them to grab hold of and have that kind of connection. So, and they're going to be reluctant to go to mental health, right? Because they don't know what they're suffering is a mental health issue. They just know this is their life. This isn't something new that's come upon them. It's their life. So what institutions need to do in response is to understand the nature of the other, to develop their leadership. It's not about training. You cannot train people into being more sensitive or changing their behavior. They have to be developed. And so that's a sustaining dialogue. It's a sustaining engagement. It's challenging them. It's providing them opportunities to succeed and to practice. And this should be part of the idea when you have some basic, we know we're here to, expand knowledge and to have fantastic research. We also should be here to develop as an organization. And that means that we're going to have to start making that a priority when we hire people, when we promote them. How are they developing themselves in diversity, equity, inclusion? And what artifacts do they have at that? And until we start doing that development, we're going to just always be pulling out Band-Aids, right? People are going to be bleeding. We're just going to keep pulling out Band-Aids. And that's not the appropriate approach.
There's a lot to follow up on, I think, on what both of you said. And Chiquita, I'll start with you in terms of in the workplace. You talked about conflict and having employers be prepared to deal with that in an effective way, especially as it relates to inclusion. So can you talk a little bit more about that? What should employers be doing to be better at that?
I would say there needs to, like I said, cultural humility. I'll use me for an example. I served 23 years in the Navy. And so I remember as a young sailor at the time, I was cornered in an office by my division officer who was upset because I challenged a comment that was made. And his response was, "You people." But I'm serving the country just like you are. So what do you mean when you say you people? We have to be mindful of our language. We have to be mindful of, again, microaggressions, and we have to check our bias at the door. I'll say it that way.
Yeah, great. And Margo, when you talk about development, and developing our leaders and the new folks that we're bringing into organizations, what are some of the things that employers can look at? Because I think you had mentioned, you can't train somebody to be sensitive, but what can employers be doing to ensure that their employees are more sensitive, have more cultural humility?
Sure. So I would say that first they need to say that's what's required. Right? So employers should be putting in their job postings this implied expectation or explicit expectation that when you work for this organization, it's expected that you would add value to the efforts that are being made to diversify, become more international, more global, to promote the success of everyone, regardless of identity and background. It should be very clear. That's more than the EEO statement, right? And what you do when you embed that there in the job ad, and also, as you talk about the job description, you allow yourselves the ability to then test that, right? And so then when we have performance evaluations, there should be several metrics, not just one, but several metrics of how employees can demonstrate how they have done exactly what you told them you expected. And they should be able to be rewarded for that in some way. That may be professional development that allows them to explore a different environment. Maybe they go get mentored at a different institution or a different organization, or change the department so they can broaden their knowledge base. Maybe they get to teach a seminar or bring a webinar together on some of the things they've done, highlighting their work. So you start to, everything's not monetary, but you start to put emphasis on those who are doing well.
Yeah.
And then I would say, make sure they understand the definitions. Make sure they understand what you're asking them. So we use cultural humility and we throw it around like everybody knows what that means, right? And so it really is the stance that you take when you're dealing with others, that you let them inform you about what's important to them, how they function, what their needs are, how do they see the world, instead of presuming that even if you're woke, right? Most of us are really just sleepwalking. We're not really woke, right? You don't overstate yourself in the center. You allow yourself to be absorbed by expanding knowledge and shared meaning. So that's important. I would say too, it's an investment. So organizations have to put their money where their mouth is. So I would recommend for the leadership over time to make a timeline of how they would develop their leadership, as well as incorporate immediately into the onboarding process a path for development. And a wonderful tool that's available is the intercultural diversity index. It's called the IDI. And what it does is a person can take it themselves. It takes maybe an hour and 15 minutes to take it. And it allows them to answer a series of questions. And it talks about a few things. One, the communication style and how they see the interaction of culture. And it asks some real simple questions. And at the end of it, you get an index that talks about where you are on this intercultural development curriculum, right? So no matter where you fall, if you start off at I just woke up today and found out who knew there were Asian Americans suffering, right? I had no clue about this stuff. So if you're on that part of the scale, that's fine. If you're on the farthest end, that I'm out there now sponsoring diversity efforts, I am, in the march, whatever that is. It gives you a starting place with no guilt, like no judgment. It gives you a starting place. And then there you get an individual who will help make a plan to develop from one place to the next across the continuum. And that's your personal work, right? And so I love that. It also talks about your ability to deal with conflict, because part of our issue, at least here in Iowa, is that we're conflict avoidance, and we call that nice, right? And that's not nice. The best thing we can do when we're in conflict is the first time, say it. To be able to say to someone, oh, wait a minute, I think something just happened that crossed my boundaries, and it's only fair for me to let you know so you know how we can work together best. That's fair, right? And it can be delivered evenly without breaching a relationship. So the other thing I would say is employers should think about how they have their engagement groups or their affinity groups, right? And how they support them, what resources they give them to thrive. How do they let them have both autonomy and also a space to talk about the things they're doing and concerning them without jeopardizing them. You may have very little diversity in your organization now, so you don't have a affinity group for every identity then, because it points people out. You have a group affinity group, right? So people can still bubble up some of the things that concern them from their identity perspectives. And then a third option is to build in intergroup dialogues. This gives an opportunity for folks who are in the majority and in a marginalized group, regardless what it is. It could be on religion, it could be on ability and ableism and disability, it could be on anything. Two dichotomic kind of groups. It's a process. It's modeled after the University of Michigan's intergroup dialogue. So you can go out there and get those materials, and you teach them how to communicate in a sustained way. Dialogues are sustained over some weeks, and to do that around topics that may be uncomfortable because they have identity-based issues with them. So we've done that. We've done that at Iowa State, brought that on at Iowa State. And I've had that at Indiana University, Purdue University, where I worked prior. And it's just a wonderful tool. People come away enlightened. They still are sleepwalking, right? But they're better off. And so they can continue to practice based on other identities. So those are some things I would suggest employers look at to kind of increase that, those factors for themselves.
And I would like to piggyback off of what Margo said. There's a difference. There's truly a difference than being invited to the dance, being included, and being able to dance, belonging. And so we talk about diversity and inclusion, but we forget that valued piece, which is belonging. Do I really belong? And so hiring managers, they have to be, and this is a key word, intentional. They have to be intentional about recruiting and retaining a diverse workplace, for one. And then one of the other things I jotted down was employers should do an honest assessment, like Margo was saying. Will Chiquita really, will she be a good fit here? Not just to check the box and fit that diversity and inclusion, check that box, but why would she want to work here? And why wouldn't she want to work here? And that is when you're checking your culture, your environment. And I also wonder, Margo was talking about the affinity groups. That's vital. That is truly vital, as well as honoring the wisdom that your diverse workforce brings.
Mm-hmm.
And I would challenge a little bit around the fit. Be careful with the fit question, because fit what? So maybe the question should be not how do they fit, but do we fit that individual, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a place you're asking people to uproot their lives sometimes and to
Right.
come and work, and you think you've won when you get a diverse body. But if that person can't find their way, can't be mentored or shuttled or informed or allowed to thrive, then they're going to be leaving that organization as fast as they come. So you have to do your work. At one point, I was very reluctant to say to folks, "Oh, you need to come to my organization. We're really wanting to have diverse talent," and that was true. But it was like, well, wait a minute. I'm putting my street cred out there, right? I'm asking people to come, and I know that the house isn't clean yet. So you don't invite visitors to your house, and you still have a sink full of dirty dishes.
That's right.
So it's about getting that environment ready too. So don't just charge out and and put energies and efforts in diversifying your workforce. Until you do what it takes to make sure the people who are already on your workforce will feel like they belong, and they're seriously considering how they engage others doing their work. Because that's unfair. It's unfair, and it's even detrimental because, from the time we introduce people through the interview process, they're interviewing us too. And so if they have a terrible time at that point, all the way up into employment, they become our worst marketers. They go out and they'll tell other people like them or other people who will be associated with them, this is not the place to come. So make sure you have your dishes washed. Are you in the middle of washing them? Before you just start inviting everybody into your house.
Yep.
That's my advice.
Yeah. And so here's another analogy. Okay, and this is real for me. I served 2 tours with the Navy SEALs, and then I was on 2 aircraft carriers. So during the war, Iraqi war, I was off the coast. And so your company is your ship. If a fire breaks out on that ship, you all are going to have to fight that fire. You won't have time for biases. You won't have time for microaggressions. You won't have time for discrimination. All you know is that you all are the reputation of that company. And you know you need to fight that fire so that everyone, with regards to the ship, is going to be safe and make it home. And so in order for your company to grow, everyone has to come out of themselves and get to know one another. Because I can give you something, Emily. I can pour something into you, just like you can pour something into me. And I speak about this coming from Chicago. I grew up in the projects in Chicago. I've been all over the world. I've worked with the greatest. Met General Colin Powell, had a really rough day yesterday. And so it was different type of people that helped me mold. There wasn't people that just looked like me. And so together, you guys have got to, in every company, you guys have got to come together to make your place the most welcoming and not have those dirty dishes, as Margo said. Does that make sense?
And when it comes to that employee retention, I'm just curious, both of your thoughts on, making sure that your company is ready to be, inclusive. But what are the ways that you can make sure that employees feel that both within the company and maybe even if you're asking them to move to your community, what are the ways that you can ensure that they feel included, that they feel like they can be part of what you're doing?
I would say, you want to go, Margo? I only have a few things. Performance appraisals, have a bias reporting process in place other than Title IX. Have a hiring committee, but you want to have a hiring committee that doesn't mirror hiring folks that look just like them or act like them or have the behaviors.
I would say that start at the top. So if you're an organization that has a board of trustees, a board of directors, it's important to have these conversations there. It's important to make sure that they seek out diverse people to be on those boards to help inform. Then going down to the leadership of the organization, making sure at the table you have diverse folks sitting at that table, at the leadership making decisions. They should include people who have control over money and who have control over facilities, have control over, product, R&D, whatever you're doing, the marketing. So at this point, it will feel very token, right? And that's okay. You've got to grow. So you may have a period where it feels like you're going through tokened hires, but you have to get the folks in the system. And don't just bring one. right? So traditionally, the board has had 12 to 15 people on it. Okay, we're going to expand to 20, right? We're going to do this so we can intentionally find 20 diverse folks to add to, I'm sorry, 5 more diverse folks to add to the group. Traditionally, the president's, leadership group or cabinet had, 3 people, 3 to 5 people sitting there, all of them, while they do have diversity among them, I'm sure, but not necessarily represented diversity.
Right.
Now it's time to come in to focus on who else are we missing at this table and go get them. And I would say, go steal them, poach them. Do not wait for them to just show up in your pools. The associations that do the work that you're looking for this person to fulfill, go to those associations, solicit their executive boards, peruse organizations, see who's on their leadership team and call them up and say, do I have a deal for you? That's true recruitment, right? And be willing to pay what you pay. And that's the fear is that we won't be out of equity when we pay a little more. But there is a couple things. One, generational wealth is not necessarily seated with the folks who are brown and Black, LGBTQIA, or disabled. They're just not. They are still probably part of the first generation themselves, even though they may be high in the organization. And if they're high in the organization, they probably have 2 to 3 families living off that one income. That's just the truth, right? Yeah. And so the other piece that you have to keep in mind is everybody wants somebody who's diverse. So these people who hold these identities are a pretty hot commodity. So you're in competition with other organizations trying to get some of the best and the brightest. The other point I would say is it's okay to go tier down one. So you're looking for someone who is going to be in a VP role. Go look at your associate VPs currently and your assistant VPs who are diverse, and grow creme de la creme in your organization, right? Especially if you're talking about, you're looking at financial implications. It's okay to do that. This is equity. When you bring someone in and you help them become successful in your organization, you end up getting all the benefits of being the place to be. If you are diverse and want to grow, you need to be with organization X because they really invest. So changing those mindsets at the leadership level is what you need to do before you start bringing people into the organization, maybe at that 3rd level down. Supervisors and managers, of course, you can also diversify, but the messaging is coming from the top down, right? Board, executive leaders, managers are what we're trying to accomplish here and what your expectations are. And then look among your workforce for people who are willing to be mentors or partners. They may be on the same level to help new people navigate the system and become into awareness of how your organization actually functions.
I would say trust, character, and integrity. You gotta have that. Trust, character, and integrity. If you say you're gonna do something, if you say you're gonna make that change, make that change. If you can't, come forth, be forthright and say, hey, we thought we could do this, however, we can't. But when you say you're gonna do it and you don't, you lose. You lose your employees' trust. And so I would also say be vulnerable. Be vulnerable. And when you have a diverse workforce, or be vulnerable and ask the questions you don't know. That's how we learn.
Great. Well, thank you both for all of your thoughts. And it seems like we always come up on our time so quickly, but I wanted to just thank you both for all of your thoughts and all of the ways that we can all be thinking about making our organizations more inclusive. So I appreciate both of you taking time with us today.